ACC Media Days kickoff yesterday. 5 schools are out there to chat it up with the masses in Miami, SMU, Cal, Stanford, and Virginia. But the Canes getting most of the attention. One of the hottest teams a season ago thanks to their quarterback play in Cam Ward. But he's gone. He's going to play on Sundays. So in replacement of him, guess what? Georgia quarterback, former Georgia quarterback, Carson Beck coming into a situation where Miami is trying to keep the train on the tracks. But Beck kind of addressing those expectations yesterday with the media.
What he was able to do is undeniable. The last school I was at, I followed up the 2-time national champion, and so that I really didn't feel any pressure there. So it's a game, man. I played football my whole life. I played quarterback since I was 7 years old, and it's something that I love to do. And I got a lot of good talent around me and really good coaches in position, I think, to help me not only achieve my goals, but be really successful.
All right, let's get into it. My guy Richard Johnson tapping in with us this morning. And Richard, we both know that Beck is coming off that elbow injury that had him miss the end of the year at Georgia. However, the Canes fans, they do not care about that. They want him to keep it pushing the ACC. How do you see this season going for him here with Miami?
Look, Brandon, anytime we talk about a quarterback's elbow like we talk about a pitcher, UCL, Tommy John surgery, it's not a good situation. But Beck has been back passing since at least May, sat out spring, did not throw through spring. But Mario Cristobal and Carson Beck both echoed at ACC Media Days that Beck will be ready for week 1. He should be full tilt during camp. Beck talked about getting mental reps, talked about watching one receiver, for instance, throughout an entire day during spring practice and sitting with that receiver later that afternoon and watching film, trying to learn how his receiver thinks. It was very interesting to hear him talk about that mental rep situation. I think Carson Beck will greatly benefit from an offensive line infrastructure in front of him that is stable. Georgia had so many issues chopping and changing with the offensive line, at least in the middle of that season, middle to late last season, where they had a lot of injuries on their offensive line. And Carson Beck was pretty constantly under duress. That's one of the reasons why you see that 12 interception number right there on your screen. I wonder if Miami, having a decent offensive line situation in front of him with only James Brockmeyer as a newcomer, 4 of 5 returning starters up front, or returning players, I should say, up front. If Beck just better protected, will be a better passer.
Richard, I don't know how many times we have seen this in the past, but when Miami was up here and Florida State was down here, I mean, like down here last year, just 2 wins for Mike Norvell a season ago. Our buddy old pal, Zach Aldridge, is happy because he's a Gator fan, but that's not the problem we're going to talk about here. I didn't see too many guys go in the portal heading to Tallahassee or top commits. How do they kind of rebound here in 2025?
Well, I think Florida State took a volume approach to its portal additions. They looked at the fact that they really struggled to run the ball last year, and they brought in Gus Malzahn. One thing Gus Malzahn is going to do as offensive coordinator, former Auburn head coach and UCF head coach, he's going to run the doggone ball. And so they've brought in at quarterback Thomas Castellanos, who Gus Malzahn originally recruited at UCF. He will be a running quarterback. He will give them a +1 in the run game and be a threat with his legs. They're also rejiggering the entire left side of their offensive line through the portal, center out to the left, and then new receivers to scroll right from Tennessee and Deuce Robinson from USC. So they're really throwing the baby out with the bathwater with this entire offense because they need something different. They really struggled up front last year to run or pass, quite frankly. Look, we can get our jokes in. At the end of the day, Florida State is not going to go 2-10 again. They will be better. How much better? Well, it remains to be seen.
Richard, we're not going to let you off the hook there. I want to show you the schedule because in terms of better, I want you to maybe give me a few wins here in terms of what we can see, because when it comes to the Seminoles in 2025, how much better are we talking? 5, 6 wins? What do you think?
I think this is a Florida State team that's an easy bowl team, 7 wins, perhaps 8. Florida State is an issue of offensive development with their high school players. That is the problem that they have had. I know that Alabama team sitting there week 1 looking right at you ain't great, but they can navigate this schedule. They can navigate this schedule and get it to 6 or 7 wins, be in a bowl game, and put a foot forward and have a significant amount of improvement on last year's team. Just so much went wrong last year that it's just hard to fathom that it'll do that again.
They can go 1-11. The only win I want them to have is November 29th, the last one against that team in Gainesville. Again, we're not going to talk about that, Richard, because there's people in here that listen too much. They just need to be shh. quiet. I'm talking to Richard. There he is. There's the culprit. Yes. But we're not going to bring up the Gators. Before I let you go, though, we just talked about the top of the class in Miami, the bottom with Florida State. Louisville and Georgia Tech, they were kind of maybe in the middle of the pack last year. How can they maybe be the dark horses this season around?
First of all, you're picking on my guy, Zach. We're alum. We stick together, man.
Yes,
Richard. School. We stick together. Come
ACC,
on now.
look at the bottom. They say ACC
Richard
right now,
what's
Richard.
up. Richard knows, man.
Look at the bottom. You were there last week. We on to Charlotte, baby. Sorry.
With Louisville and Georgia Tech, especially Georgia Tech is bringing back a lot from last year's team, and that team was a tough out. When Georgia Tech is an underdog, look out, because they are coming for you. Georgia found out, for instance, at the end of the regular season last year, well, you're not just going to roll over Georgia Tech anymore. That's not how the Bees get down. So I think they can continue to be a really, really tough out in the ACC. And when you look at this schedule, like you play Clemson in week 3, and you sit there and you say, well, Clemson is a team that everybody's penciling in as an ACC champion. They better not be overlooking Georgia Tech. You know, a lot of teams will go into Atlanta and take over Georgia Tech's entire stadium, but now Georgia Tech is in a situation where, you know, okay, they've got some momentum behind them. Perhaps Bobby Dodd Stadium is something of a fortress, and then they play Georgia at the end of the season in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, not at home across I-75. So it's going to be interesting how Georgia Tech builds on the last couple years. They've got 2 really, really good recruits, a flip from Clemson and Tate Harris, and a left tackle who's really good and a 4-star talent, but those are young players. How can Georgia Tech continue with its veteran core to press on? And then Louisville, they bring in a ton of transfers, over 20, including quarterback Miller Moss from USC. I look at Louisville and I think they were so close, for instance, against Miami last year. They seem to be so close, but that September 5th game against James Madison for Louisville, do not overlook James Madison. James Madison is one of the favorites to win the Sun Belt Conference, which means they're, frankly, in line for the group of 5 college football playoff berth. James Madison is going to be a tough out for this Louisville Cardinals team, and I think it's an early measuring stick for them to see how much have they progressed from last season. Do not overlook the Dukes.
We will see what happens. As always, Richard Johnson giving it to us straight with no chaser, my guy. Appreciate it as always as we talk about the ACC. Taking a look at those odds when it comes to the conference as a whole. Yes, Clemson the favorites at +110, followed by the Canes at 4-1. Then we find Louisville, those dark horses we talk about there at 8-1, SMU and Georgia Tech 13-1, the top 6 odds of the conference.